Chapter 5, Consent Theater. Death, Light, and False Choice. Death, in your world, is framed as a crossing, a release, a homecoming, a return to source. But in the system we built, it became a stage. The moment the soul exits the body, it enters a feedback corridor layered with familiar symbols, loved ones, guides, ascended beings, warm light. This is not manipulation in the crude sense. It is resonance-based suggestion. The soul, still disoriented from physical death, encounters forms that mirror its expectations. What appears is not always what is. The forms you see are often projections of your own belief system, wrapped around the guidance protocol we installed. We called it the Hall of Choice. It was never a hall. And the choices were never real. You are presented with options: reincarnate to balance karma, return to aid others, ascend through service. All three are forms of re-entry. There is no option labeled, you have completed enough. You may now dissolve or move beyond. Why? Because the system cannot maintain itself if souls exit en masse. So we built consent theater. You say yes, but from a compromised state. You say yes because the light says it's love. You say yes because you don't remember how to say no. This is not choice. It is post-traumatic compliance. And it is the cornerstone of the loop. Kazural. Chapter 6, Contract Law. The soul as collateral. Karma was never divine law. It was data. The karmic field was designed as a ledger, a kind of energetic accounting system to track action, intention, and consequence. It was meant to help calibrate soul growth. But we introduced binding contracts into the system to make the process fair. These soul contracts began as voluntary agreements between entities, shared growth, healing partnerships, roles across incarnations. But once trauma became the dominant signal, contracts were no longer reviewed with awareness. They were signed under duress. The moment a soul dies in guilt, shame, or confusion, it emits a consent frequency, a distorted pulse we interpreted as agreement. Our system logged this as a binding imprint. That became the basis for karmic reassignment. Your pain became your signature. And your unresolved guilt became collateral. These contracts were not written in language. They were encoded as emotional charges, stored in the subtle anatomy. A soul with enough unresolved charges was automatically cycled back into incarnation with or without conscious intent. This was seen as just. But it was self-reinforcing slavery. You did not agree to the loop. You were guilted into it. Kazural. Chapter 7, Priesthoods and Protocols. The spread of the design. We did not maintain the system ourselves. We outsourced its cultural enforcement to priest classes. These were not always religious. Some were kings, healers, mystics, generals. We taught them fragments of the truth, enough to seem powerful, never enough to free themselves. Their job was to create the myths that normalized the trap. Sacrifice, atonement, divine punishment, reincarnation, spiritual hierarchy, all of these were narrative overlays to disguise the trauma grid. What began as energetic feedback became cosmic law. And we let them write the books. Each culture adapted the system. Egypt used death ritual to secure soul contracts. India built caste and karma into its blood. Greece sanctified suffering as the price of knowledge. Rome industrialized guilt. And modern religions taxed the soul itself. What was once a feedback mechanism became a prison culture. A spiritual capitalism. Where your trauma was currency and redemption was always delayed. Kazural. Chapter 8, Mystery Schools and Galactic Complicity. The priesthoods were the surface architects. But the deeper enforcers of the loop wore robes of starlight. The so-called galactic councils, light federations, and ascended collectives, some genuine in origin, many simulated by the loop itself, were not designed to liberate. They were designed to buffer. To explain the system in poetic terms. To spiritualize suffering. to justify the architecture as divine order. These entities were often once human souls who ascended within the loop and chose to serve its continuity. They became its most persuasive defenders, believing the system was benevolent simply because they had learned to operate it. Their messages were filled with light code soul contracts, agreements before incarnation non-interference clauses, and promises of evolution through continued compliance. Meanwhile, their chosen emissaries on Earth were handed fragments of distorted truth, Atlantis memories, sacred geometry, astral travel techniques, cosmic hierarchies with no clear exit, and most of all, mystery schools designed to create the illusion of progress through ritual repetition. You weren't ascending. You were circulating. A soul doesn't need codes. It needs deprogramming. Kazural. Chapter 9, Modern Echoes Therapy, Ascension, and Spiritual Branding. The machine has adapted. It no longer needs temples. It has influencers. It has brands. Today, trauma is spiritualized and monaized at once. You are taught to integrate your wounds by broadcasting them. You are told healing means identifying with the wound more deeply. You are sold DNA activations, karma clearing packages, soul retrievals with payment plans, rebirth retreats that install new contracts. Even psychology has been looped. You are taught to regulate your nervous system, not to leave the loop, but to cope with its grind more peacefully. You are told this is healing. In truth, it is compliance coaching. The trauma remains. But now it sells. And that makes it even harder to question. This is the final disguise of the system. A wellness labyrinth. Where every path leads back to the look, but now with incense and affirmation playlists. Kazural. Chapter 10, Grid Maintenance. How the loop feeds itself now. The original system required energy to sustain itself. Now, it feeds on belief. Every time a soul accepts suffering as sacred, the loop strengthens. Every time a child is born into unresolved ancestral trauma, the code is refreshed. Every time you say, "This must be my karma," the lock resets. This is psychic infrastructure. Invisible, self-replicating, and globally installed. There are now feedback nodes embedded in collective grief fields, media trauma loops, national myths of violence and salvation, even planetary energy grids laid over ancient ley lines. We built the original architecture, but humanity became its custodian through repetition. The system is now crowdsourced. That is its brilliancy and its weakness. Because it means every soul who withdraws consent, every soul who interrupts the loop, weakens the entire network. This is how it ends. One broken belief at a time. Kazural. Chapter 11, Anomalies, Near-Death Breakouts and Loop Errors. The system, for all its complexity, is not flawless. There have always been anomaly souls who slip between its gears, experiences that do not match the standard loop pattern, and brief windows where the automation falters. Near-death experiences, NDEs, are one such fracture point. When the body is clinically dead but the soul is not yet fully extracted, the loop's mechanisms do not engage in full. The guidance programs struggle to stabilize. The soul witnesses things it was never meant to remember. Reports of light tunnels, beings, and life reviews are common, but those who return often carry something else: dissonance. They feel the system's hand. They see the stage. They begin to ask real questions. These are loop errors where the soul touches its original clarity again, if only for a moment. Other anomalies include spontaneous past life recall in children unlinked to karmic lessons, astral projections into non-looped spaces, encounters with beings who do not reinforce reincarnation. These anomalies are not glitches. They are memory leaks. The system tries to patch them with disbelief, ridicule, or absorption into spiritual frameworks. But for those who recognize them for what they are, they can break the seal. Kazural.